This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries. Because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. Today is Wednesday, March 26, 2025, and we're talking with some cider makers from Maine as we plan out our Cider Feast Portland Year 2, which will be May 11th up in Portland, Maine. So, guys, let's go around the room. I'm Jimmy Carbone. I'm the host on Beer Sessions Radio, celebrating 16 years, and shout out to support heritageradionetwork.org. So, we'll go Zach, Patrick, and Larry. You guys give a quick intro.
Yeah, I'm Zack Kaiser. I'm the cider maker and co-founder of Absolem Cider.
Hey, I'm Parick Chavanelle. I am the R&D manager at Allagash Brewing Company.
I'm Larry Westler. I am the cider maker at Apres.
So we'll start by just, I'm going to talk to each one of you separately just to kind of give everyone a little background about you and get to know your voices. So let's start with Zach. Zach, I know you were a regular listener to this show for a while. And a few years back when I started hosting some Cider Feast events in Massachusetts, you'd reached out, and you're one of the reasons why we actually go up to Portland. Why don't you tell everybody about how you got started in this? I know Absolem makes and serves cider as well as beer. You're quite involved in it, and again, you're one of the ciders that stands out in the whole Northeast region for me, and it's one reason why I wanted to go up to Maine and try everything.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment of our when it comes to our ciders. So yeah, I started actually out in beer, which I think is kind of I have a couple people that I know who've gotten into cider who started in beer. So that's kind of where I originally came from. I used to brew beer, did marketing and sales in breweries. Kind of got enamored with mixed fermentation beers, saisons, and then that kind of led me towards naturally fermented, wild fermented ciders and natural wine and things like that. And so yeah, I kind of started out at Millstone Cellars making cider. Was my first cider experience, which was back in 2013, 14, which was a pretty exciting time, early days in the cider industry. And yeah, since then it's just I've gotten even tighter and closer with cider and wanted to keep learning more and more about it and kind of just keep obsessing myself with fermentation and cool ingredients and things like that. So and now I'm in Maine where cider, apples, and apples period is kind of like a major ingredient that we can use locally to make wine. And that's kind of where it kind of all started for me, I guess.
That's great. We're going to talk a lot about Maine apples too. Patrick, a little about your background. You're working at Allagash Brewery, and yet you're also making cider.
Yep, we sure are. Yeah, I've been at the brewery for 14 years now, which is like a third of my life, which is crazy to think about from that perspective. So I'm quite familiar with beer, obviously. A lot of what I do is around recipe development, but learning around fermentation is from like a general perspective is has like been a main focus of my time there. And about, I don't know, I want to say 3 years ago or so, we decided that we were interested in having another offering in our tasting room that was something other than beer that could be an option for folks that visit us that may not want to consume beer for any particular reason. And really, what made the most sense to us was to start making cider. So we got our winery license. I educated myself because going into cider making with a beer background, they're not the same. It is fermentation, yes, but they're very different from one another. So I started attending some classes at the Cider Institute, and then from there, just became more and more obsessed with apples and cider in general. So we make cider on an annual basis, and we do it all at once. I think we're what's referred to, and probably everyone here maybe, as like an orchard-driven cidery, and that we're just making cider once a year and making enough to have for the entire year until come harvest the following season. So yeah, at this point, I'm just fully immersed and obsessed with cider in general. I'm going to UC Davis to get my winemaker certification, and I'm all in. I'm obsessed. So yeah, I can't wait to keep
Yes.
talking with y'all. We did it. And then it's been great talking to folks locally too, like Zach and Larry, and creating these connections, not just with them, but connections with growers and farmers who we've never really talked to before. Allagash has, this long history of using fruit and beer, and for whatever reason, apples just weren't on our radar up until we decided to make cider. So it's been really great to, chat with local cider makers, create connections and partnerships with local orchards, and yeah, just sort of solidify ourselves even more in the state that we were in.
That's great, great intro, Patrick. And now let's go to Larry. Larry, again, how you got into this? I will say that I know many years ago, maybe 10 or 12 or 15 years ago, you were actually at my old beer bar in New York City, Jimmy's number 43, for a little intimate tasting and talk with Andy Brennan of Aaron Burr Cider.
Yeah, I mean, my origin story is all owed to you, Jimmy.
Keep going.
Um, no. So, yeah, I'm from New York. I've always been surrounded by the really strong apple culture in New York. As a kid, we'd go pick your own upstate. Went to school at Ithaca College in the Finger Lakes. Um, they had a really strong apple culture up there, and this is before like Redbird and Black Diamond and so many of the other giants that are up there now were there. Actually graduated, I think, the year after Eve's opened. So as a 22-year-old, I had access to Eve's cider and Bellwether cider up there, and it really opened up my eyes to what cider could be. Um, and I kept it as kind of like a passion and a hobby. I'd go to farmers markets and check out apples, and then I moved up here. And I come from actually the photo world as a photo editor and art director, and switched careers right around pandemic. Apres was opening up in the East Bayside neighborhood in Portland, um, and I'd been kind of flirting with the idea of getting into the cider industry somehow. Like, I would host cider pairing dinners at my house, and I would make some cider in my basement with kind of whatever juice I could get. But it wasn't until I went to Mafka's Apple Camp and met some other people who were kind of like-minded that it really pushed me to kind of go like that next step and start pressing. So when they opened up here, it's pretty close to my house, and I took a chance. I started working as a bartender, getting involved in the cider program by sourcing apples, So similar to what Patrick was talking about, I was going around, making a network of farmers and orchardists, and it was really, really fulfilling and really exciting to kind of meet these people. Um, and at the end of like 2023, I became full-time production and started kind of running the cider program here. So it's been a lot of learning as I go. I don't really have that formal background, and this is kind of my first real experience in the commercial world making cider.
Well, those are all great intros. Well, Larry, you guys all talked about the apples in Maine. Larry, you mentioned Mufka. Um, why don't we each of you talk about some of the resources that are there in Maine that helps make really good ciders, whether it's organizations or farms that you work with. Why don't you go through? We'll go through again. Start with Zach, Patrick, and Larry. Just give a shout out to one as an organization or farm or someone else that you guys work with that helps you make better cider. Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Maine's got two major things going for it. It has this attention to agriculture that is pretty immense, and MOFGA kind of leads that, the Maine Organic Farmers and Growers Association. So they are, supporting farmers, helping them with, state research or outside research from other states. Even doing, you can send samples to them and help them kind of look at how your growing practices are working, test your soils, things like that. So we have that type of advantage of having an organization that helps people do that, have access to research, and then we also have people who are really just kind of geeks for apples, like John Bunker, who kind of kickstarted this historical movement towards learning more about the history of apples in Maine, and then has now spread kind of his knowledge across the country. And Maine Heritage Orchard now is kind of a place where you can see these trees living in an orchard, and it's kind of this genetic stock of kind of cool heritage heirloom apple varieties that kind of probably would have been lost to time if it wasn't for John Bunker's work. So that's a cool subculture that kind of lays the groundwork for cider makers who now have access to all these really cool apple varieties or stories to kind of play off of. And then I think that Maine also has this advantage, and I'm looking at Patrick when I say this, but like there's so many breweries in this state that make fantastic beer, and for sure the fermentations are completely different, but having people who know kind of the general kinetics of fermentation and have access to tanks and tools and supplies and things like that is pretty helpful as well. So
It's great. Patrick, one of your connections, or I mean, you mentioned you're an
Sure.
orchard driven cider maker. You wanted to give a
Yeah.
shout out to some of the orchards and
Yeah.
things that you work.
Yeah. I mean, before I get into that, Zach had some great ones, kind of stole mine. So thanks a lot for that, Zach. Um,
that's because he
but
said me first.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Good luck,
Exactly. You
Larry.
can also say it in your own words too. So
Yeah. Well, the one thing I was going to say, and, might be a little cheesy because he's on right now, is Zach has been an incredible resource for me. And it's similar to being in the brewery world in a sense where, if you're a local brewery, it almost feels like you can reach out to any other brewery either in your area or greater area around you, and people are more than willing to help out. And that's exactly what like Zach has done for me with a number of questions I've had when I was starting. So being able to rely on him and other folks in the state who make cider and have been doing it for much longer than I have has been an incredible resource and really helpful in the process and ensuring that I have a better sense of what I'm doing. And then in terms of orchards, the one I guess I'd like to mention, and I know is utilized by Zach at times as well, as Giles Family Farm. So they're an orchard in Alfred, Maine, and they also press a fair amount of cider. not year round, but just about. They're still pressing right now from apples that they have in climate controlled storage. And we outsource some of our pressing to Frank Boucher at Giles. And he's a great person in general. And he's been helpful in the process of just coordinating pressing. So if there's anyone that's listening to this right now that has any interest in making cider in Maine, you don't have to start with equipment right away. You can outsource your pressing and just bring in juice and ferment it that way. And Frank is a great place to, or Giles in particular, is a great place to go. And I know Zach, you've worked with Frank before, pressing some apples and doing some other weird projects with. So yeah, he's definitely someone who's helped us along the way and was really integral in getting us off the ground to produce the volume that we were looking to do right away. Because there was no way that we could have pulled that off in house with the equipment that we have. So
Yeah, just to add to that really quickly, like he's another person that we can give him crazy ideas and he's down to play around, you know? I think some people who you ask them to help you with a project, they might be like, I don't know, I've never done that before, but Frank's one of those guys that'll go right in, you know?
That's great. And Larry, what about you? Resources and we're talking about orchards and Mofka and everything.
Yeah, I mean, going last is really screwing me over a little bit here. Everything Zach and Patrick said, we use Giles too. We started with Mike and Eli Thompson up in New Gloucester, so we use them as well. To add to what Patrick said, we're also orchard based, harvest based, I'd say. We do try to keep our focus on Maine grown apples, Maine produce in general. So we work with 15 or 20 orchards throughout the state, and I'm always trying to expand that. So John's been a good resource, Mafka in general for us as well. Um, Renee Moran at University of Maine has been really helpful. She's put me in touch with a lot of orchards that were looking to sell fruit, but didn't have the business connections yet. So we've partnered with like Goss Berry Farm through that, and a couple of others. It's so difficult to go to one orchard for everything we use. Um, so just in the fall, I'm driving around the state, kind of reconnecting or meeting new orchardists. Um, I'd say, and also, obviously Zach's been a good resource. Patrick and I have competed over apples, so I don't know if that makes him a resource or an enemy.
enemy.
Um, Enemy, yeah, frenemy. Let's go frenemy. But I mean, been great, like getting to meet him this past year or so. David Buchanan at Portersfield was one of the first resources for me personally. He's been absolutely phenomenal. Been good to talk to about a lot of things. He's helped me out a lot. And then Angus at Rocky Ground, Gene at Whaleback, um, all basically, I think the community of cider makers has been growing, especially in the past year or two, really expanding. A lot of new cideries opening, and I think that community is really starting to grow in terms of more connections being made and more people being able to ask each other questions. I don't know that it was quite there 5 years ago, let's say.
Well, Larry, I'll tell you, last year when we were reaching out to, I mean, almost everyone that came to Cider Feast Portland last year, I met that day. And when I was reaching out to people, I think we ended up with about 15 cideries from Maine, but there were at least five that messaged and said, "Hey, we're not licensed yet, but we want to come next year." So it seems like there's a lot more new cideries. Is that a connection between the great apples up there? I mean, is that what drives the ciders in Maine?
I mean, I feel like there still could be more apples grown here, in all honesty. So I don't know if it's like, I think it's the cider makers just having space to want to experiment. I also think there's this quality of homesteading in Maine that has kind of come to the forefront of what people they wanted to move to Maine, start a farmstead, and it's very easy for somebody to plant 10 trees at their house and start making cider. So like, that's the fun thing about cideries is that they can be super nano size, kind of similar to like winemaking in France, where it's, out of your garage. So I think there's a lot of that happening as well. Like just people getting really excited, moving to some place, wanting to have more touch with the land and planting a couple trees. And then from there, kind of learning how much they love making cider. Um, which kind of gets me excited. Thinking about all the different kind of personal variations on different ciders. So maybe that's one reason. Perhaps I honestly, it's a tough thing to understand, but there is some an excitement happening around cider in
I
Maine.
think it's sorry to cut you off, Zach.
No, you're good.
I think it has a lot to do with just the quality of what's here too. If you think about it from a beer perspective, and in Vermont, Hill Farmstead is rated top brewery in the world many years ago, maybe still is today, and over time, more and more breweries started popping up within that same area. And maybe it's a similar thing with cider where you have folks like Absolem. When y'all came to the state and opened, there weren't a whole lot of other cider producers in the state that were making ciders like you make them. And I know it got me really excited. And it's just this excitement that, comes up and just makes you want to produce similar things, or you just get inspired by it. So, yeah, I think a lot has to do with the apples, although to get specific cider focused apple varieties in Maine can be challenging at times. Like Larry mentioned, where you could be battling for small crops of certain varieties from time to time and not even know it. Yes, there's a lot of apples that grow in Maine. There could be more for sure, but I think it's folks like Absolem and Zack and others that if you're making this high quality product that gets people excited, then you start to question whether or not like you want to do it too, especially from a homesteading perspective. If you've already been doing it at home for many years, this could be the catalyst to get you or a person to start thinking about doing it professionally. So it's kind of like it's inspirational to some extent.
Wow. Hey, and just talking about people I met last year at Portland Cider Feast, there was Jared from Cornish. Who wants to talk about him? Because he was talking about things a little differently than most people. Patrick, did you work with him at
Yeah,
Allagash?
yeah, I sure did. Yeah, I know Jared really well. We worked together for a few years when he worked at Allagash. I don't know exactly what you're referring to, although he is taking a different um, approach than probably we are because no one on this call is a grower, so we don't have our own orchards. Some of us will go pick forage for apples here and there, but they're not our trees. So that's something different that Jared is doing. Not only does he have his own apples on his property, but some of them, maybe not all of them, are ones that he's crossed, and they are literally his own creation. So from that perspective, it's pretty unique that
That's
he's
what he was
working with.
talking about,
Yeah,
was trading crosses of the buds or
yep, he's working with fruit that no one else has in the world, and that's pretty special.
yeah, no,
So,
that's just it's just the even though there's not a lot of cider makers in Maine, the the quality and the variety is really stands out for me. And I think about Jared and Cornish, it reminds me of Larry. I'm going to ask you to talk about when you met Aaron Burr in New York and Andy Brennan, because I feel like Jared is this whisperer of the breeding, and then Andy Brennan's like the whisperer of tree seedlings. I don't. So I'm only going to say I only brought it up because I know you posted about it last year. So tell me about when you met Andy Brennan in New York and what stage you were at in learning about cider.
Oh man, I was a young buck, Jimmy. I was probably early 20s. I'd had a taste of some good cider. Like I said, I'd had Eves, I'd had some Edens, Bellwether. I'd heard about Aaron Burr Cidery. I went to, I think it was the event at Jimmy's 43, was part of like the New York Cider Week. And Andy was doing a small talk, and he was just like so magnetic. I mean, people were just like so focused on everything he was talking about, and he pulls out these tiny little peri pears and these tiny like gnarled seedling apples. It was just like flavors you'd never experienced before, and flavors that weren't really easily available to most people, especially in a city. He's just a really interesting guy, and I think it's interesting that you're contrasting him with Jared, because I think of Jared as so scientific and a plant breeder in many ways. And I think Andy just has that more like back to the land, kind of casual, throw the seeds down, throw the pumice down, and kind of see what grows out of it. Um, yeah.
I mean, I think
That's cool.
that's the fun part about Maine is there's just so many people doing completely different things, and I think sometimes people look from the outside and they see cider as one thing, but I keep kind of going back to the idea that we're all kind of doing very different things. I mean, there's only one person here really making a true blueberry wine on this podcast, and we have somebody doing that. Like, we've got people making
Wild
blueberry
blueberry
wines.
wine.
Yep. We got wild blueberry wines. We've got, Angus doing foraged apple stuff. I'm definitely focusing more of my attention on co-ferments and things like that. And there's people like Jared who are doing like frozen apples, and kind of doing these weird, frozen apple ice cider combos, fire cider combinations that are kind of interesting. Um, and then I'm literally drinking this tart cherry cider by Apres right now. So everyone's doing different things and kind of in their own ways, which gets me excited. And I feel
How
like
is that cider? I've heard about it.
yeah, Charisse,
Is it any good?
yeah, pretty solid. Bing
Well, actually,
cherries.
let's talk about the wild blueberries too. Larry, at a cider feast last year, I got to try your Barund, and it was blue, and you said it was a blueberry.
Oh yeah, so we've done some, we haven't done the blueberry wine. I think that's just Patrick. But we did do barrel aged from two different vintages, all sorts of different oak barrels, big blend with wild blueberries from Passamaquoddy Tribal Blueberry Company. And we also did like a stainless tank, sort of like a more easy drinking canned version of blueberry. Um,
I had
so
yours in a bottle, and it said Barons on it.
yeah, Barons. Yeah, we're doing another vintage of that this year as well.
Let
Last
me
year,
ask you, just because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions when we talk about fruit and ciders and beers and things. From tasting that cider that you made and realizing how tart and dry it was, it changed the way I perceived adding blueberry, because I always think
Mhm.
blueberry is blue, and you kind of assume it's more like a dessert.
Right.
So, what's the misconception about using other fruits like that? Tart fruits, cherries, blueberries. And let's talk more about that, and then Zach also can talk about co-ferments, because I think a
Yeah,
lot of people get confused just because there's no real rules.
yeah, I mean, I think Zach and Patrick actually both I could say are a little bit of an inspiration for me on this. Allagash in general, the way they rest their beers on fruits is definitely an inspiration for me. And you're absolutely right. I think that when people think of a fruited cider, you think of something very sweet, something almost artificial, something that might make your teeth hurt. And, not to keep going back to Zach's points, but, cider is not a monolith. And all these ciders are different. All the cideries are approaching things differently. And we're trying to show people that when you put cider on fruit, you can get a lot of that natural fruit expression from it. And if you're doing a co-ferment, you're going to get a very, very different aspect of it that a fermented blueberry, right? And that's kind of what was happening in Barons, is not going to provide you that pure, like, as you say, dessert, like blueberry pie expression. Um, so we try to play with some co-ferments ourselves, and try to have like this barrel aged program where we're putting on fruit in a more interesting, complex way, as well as keeping stuff on mostly Maine grown fruit, but where it's a little more perceptible. Like I think what Zach is drinking right now, the Cerise, is cider rested on Montmorency and Bing cherries. So there's a little sweet cherry, a little tart cherry, actually inspired by Bantam's Rojo cider. And Bantam unfortunately went out of business, but I think that's a good expression of what we try to do with like an easier drinking fruited cider that is more familiar to most people.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you take the sweetness out of a beverage, you're left with what the fruit is providing, that has this higher level of complexity, which is kind of what these cider apples were kind of bred for or developed or literally chosen by, on homesteads for the last 200 years. They were developed by just people when they've fermented all the sugar out, they have this really unique tannin profile or fruit leather or textural component to it that kind of makes it interesting. And I see that a lot of times in even the lambic beers I would drink. That's kind of what got me into co-fermentation, was thinking about how they would rest, kind of like a base beer onto these different fruits for a long period of time. And I feel like I've taken that approach into our own cider making philosophy and trying to see how that works. And then in the same way, taking some of those influences from wine and thinking about skin contact, punch downs, and pump overs to kind of influence the flavor profiles of these ciders. And if anything, I think cider is actually a great base for a lot of these fruits because it can be light and subtle and very soft, rather than being kind of too robust, in that main flavor. So you can really kind of get the essence of the fruit without that sweetness. Um, and I think
Zach, how much
Yeah,
time do sorry, how much time do you take with your ciders? Because is it like harvest, press, and then it's June and they're ready, or
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I mean, we're all very orchard based. So again, a lot of what we're talking about is we're talking about harvest that happened from, late August, even early July. We're taking some of these fruits and making wines out of them, and then blending them with ciders in some capacities, or so kind of from August until December, we're dealing with fruit up here at Absalom, and kind of throughout the rest of the year we're tasting these things and deciding when they're ready. I mean, I have some of these things that have been aging for 2 years, while some things like our strawberry cider is something that I kind of want to keep fresher and younger and feels ready kind of, only a couple months in. But when we think about it from that perspective, it's still very different from beer and still very different from some other ciders that are made kind of very quickly. So thinking about it more like a wine perspective, a harvest based perspective, it's, you're only really getting one vintage out of each season of these things, which really makes you think about the whole system in itself when you only get one shot at it each year. Takes a lot more focus, I guess.
yeah,
Um,
we're pretty similar from a fermentation perspective. The majority of what we do is just what we call Allagash cider, and that ferments cold. It takes about, I don't know, 6, 7, maybe 8 weeks to ferment dry. Um, and then we condition it for a period of time, about 2 to 3 months, until we're pretty happy with where it's at. Uh, so that's probably the youngest, if you want to call it that, of the ones that we do. We also do ones that are in barrel for much longer. Similar to Zach, we have ones that have been in some barrels for around 2 years or so. And we will be coming out with a barrel aged cider at some point this year, that has rested in barrels for anywhere from, I don't know, 6 months to a year and a half. So it's sort of all over the place, really, which, from a blending perspective, is really nice because you're not just working with one harvest. You can be working with two or three vintages of cider to come up with whatever flavor profile you're looking to achieve. So
Patrick, do you have like a style that you call your cider? I mean, I think about just without really knowing it, and I tried it at the event and I loved it. If your cider is really geared towards drinking in the tap room, would you call it a pub cider? I mean, how do you refer to it to your customers?
we just call it a dry cider, really. And we specifically say that, and it's written in, visible language on our draft menu because going back to what we were talking about earlier, maybe we weren't, or maybe I just made that up. From a consumer facing perspective. Oh, this is what I was thinking about earlier when you mentioned fruit and cider. I think there's still a lot of education that needs to take place from a consumer perspective because, yes, if you say something like blueberry cider, someone's probably going to be going into it thinking it's really sweet. But I'm pretty sure none of us on here make a sweet cider generally, from what I know of all the ones that I've tasted from both y'all. They're dry. Even with resting on fruit, you allow for that period and that secondary fermentation to occur. So communicating that our cider is dry is important to us. So that's sort of how we stylize it. But that said, the yeast strain that we settled on leaves this perception of sweetness, which is really nice and was one of the reasons why we selected that. Where our cider is fermenting to zero essentially, so no sugars when you're measuring it on an analytical basis, but there's this perception of sweetness that's really nice. So yes, it's still very dry, but it kind of leaves this sort of slight sweetness on the palate after you take a sip. So yeah, if I had is that a style category? I don't know. Traditional dry cider.
It's a great answer. My first thought last year, I never even thought Allagash. I didn't even know you made ciders, and I tasted it and I liked it. But I did think pub cider only because of just how drinkable it was.
Sure.
I could imagine, that I would go for that drink over even many beers sometimes.
Yeah,
Um, I nailed it.
that's sort of what we were looking for. We were looking to do something that was pretty. I don't want to say straightforward, approachable, I guess. Something that isn't overly complex, although it has some complexity to it, and something that someone could come to our tasting room and drink, 12 ounces of, and quite easily. So that was essentially
Yeah,
the
but your
approach.
analogy is like it's a good pills. You've been out, well, you're traveling or a day of work, and you want that first drink. And if I had your Allagash dry cider, I would feel similar to just having that first lager.
Yeah.
Uh, when
Oh,
I'm
so
yeah.
to that, within my role, I do a lot of trials, more so now in the wine world since we make a number of products under our winery. And one thing that I trialed somewhat recently was to do like sort of super low ABV versions of our house cider. So I think we went as low as 3%, trying to get at that sort of similar experience of drinking a Pilsner. So on a hot day, sitting out in the tasting room, drinking, 16, 20 ounces or something like that. That's just super refreshing. And it came up really nice. And it's something that we're going to potentially consider at some point in the future.
What do you think? Last year you had your dry cider. If May 11th, Mother's Day, is a Cider Feast Portland, and I think I'm going to get one sixtel of something from Allagash.
Mhm.
What do you think we'll have at Cider Feast from Allagash?
If so, a lot of the things that are outside of just our standard Allagash cider are generally tasting room only, and that's typically due to just the volume that we produce of a particular type. So if I had to guess, my guess is that it would be that. Although I'd probably make a strong push to get our rosé cider on. So this is a new product that we actually just bottled recently, and we'll have bottles of in our tasting room at some point in time in the future. And what we did to make this is we make this wine called the honeyberry wine. Honeyberries are a fruit that grows on a farm in Maine, Allagash Farms, way up north in northern Maine, and it's also known as Haskap. Anyways, we make this wine using this berry, and when we emptied the barrels that that wine was in, we filled those barrels back up with our house cider, and the pigmentation of this fruit is so strong that even a tiny drop in cider kind of gives off this pink hue. And so there was enough liquid just within the staves of the barrel that it lent this like far more red color than I thought it would be, but also gave off these sort of berry-like strawberry aromas to it. So visually, it's this kind of like stunning looking beverage. And then from an aroma perspective, it sort of meets you with that initial like berry note, but then there are undertones of the apple, the base essentially that we put in those barrels. So if that's available, I'm going to push strong to pour that at the cider feast because I'm pretty stoked with how that one turned out.
Patrick, do you ever wake up and have a dream that you're making a certain kind of cider or a certain taste? You
Have a
dream
dream?
that?
Well, honestly, Jimmy, I am totally obsessed with my job and everything that I do and everything that involves fermentation. So I go to bed reading about fermentation. I dream about fermentation. I wake up, go to work. It is, it encapsulates probably every waking moment of my life. So a specific dream, I don't know. I can't think of one, but I'm sure I have.
Larry, back to you. Turning us on to, I mean, again, I'm going to talk about one of yours I tasted last year, that Barron's, the wild blueberry wine, it's cider. Um, you've got some free reign. I mean, you're there at Apres, and you guys make different beverages, including cider. But at what point were you able to, you know, make these really wonderful, drinks with different fruits like that?
Ooh, it's a really good question. Before I answer that, though, I want to reciprocate to Zach. I actually popped open a bottle of Bemble that you'd given me a few months ago, and it's delicious, man.
That's good. Awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love the acidity. So I think when we're talking about resources, one of the biggest resources at my disposal is the fact that Apres started as a cidery and a hard seltzer maker, and the hard seltzer part took off, I think, faster than the owners even imagined. That's given me a lot of leeway with kind of what apples I can buy. It's given me access to a lot of great equipment, um, and it's given me freedom to essentially make a lot of pilot batches, but in larger formats. Um, so we through the seltzer program, part of my role is also connecting with other farms, and that's turned me on to a lot of producers, a lot of other ingredients. That's kind of how I initially got connected with Passamaquoddy, is because we make a blueberry lemonade hard seltzer called Isle, and we've been using their blueberries for a while. Um, so I've just, between apples I get from orchards and press in-house, or larger batches that we get pressed at Giles or Thompson's. There's a lot of juice flowing over here, and I'm able to kind of make a lot of different styles. We try to have a very diverse portfolio. We try to keep cider accessible, and again, it's not a monolith. I think of it as lots of different styles and flavors out there for a lot of different people. So we try to have things that are easier to drink, We try to keep things that are more easily recognized by our customer base who are used to very natural, fresh tasting hard seltzers that are made with real fruits and real botanicals. So I think that kind of helps guide some of the choices we're making on the cider front. Um, I'm in terms of cider I've had that kind of guides me too. Eden's Peak Bloom is one of the best canned ciders I've ever had. It's extremely drinkable, but there's a nice tannic backbone to it. It's refreshing. It holds up with a meal. You could drink it as your pub cider. So, I think trying to create something like that is also, again, easily accessible to people, kind of drives a lot of choices.
And I'm drinking Eden a can of her Brut Rosé right now.
That's also delicious choice.
So just right for it. Anything else you want to say about what you're doing there at Apres and the journey you're on? Because again, haven't gotten to meet you and taste your drinks. Um, the three of you all together, it's like quite a group. Um,
We're the powerhouse of the next century.
I know
If
you,
I
Larry,
live
you got
that
a
long.
lot of books. I've been
Yeah.
I didn't even. Did I ask you any softball questions, Larry?
Yeah. How do you make cider?
Well, that's a good one, Larry. How do you make cider? And when you're talking about your larger test batches, what size are they?
So we do have a press in house. The smallest batches we'll make are probably, well, actually, I just did a carbonic maceration of some plums that we got from Cooper's Orchard, and that's only 5 gallons. So with our tasting room, we'd throw that into a sixtel, throw it on draft. Mostly the smaller batches are 15 gallons. Our largest fermenters, we can hold up to 420 gallons. So we're anywhere between 15 and 420 gallons for everything we're doing. We've been growing the program a lot. I think this year we have maybe 24 different releases and staggering them. It's nice. Like Zach, like Patrick, we barrel age some stuff as well. So we're releasing some 2023 vintages, some blended with 23 and 24. Some stuff we made in 2024 was released by the end of 2024 because, again, like Zach, there was some stuff that we made that I think just tasted better fresh. Um, yeah, I actually forgot the question. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Well, let's go to Zach now too. Zach, I know you're drinking some things. Tell us what you're drinking and just talk us through some of your ciders. I mean, the labels are interesting. I've only tried a few of yours in Portland. They always stand out, and I know they're at sharp places like a Noche Cider Bar.
Yeah, I mean, I think the things that I've been excited about, and I think one benefit that we have, which maybe all three of us share, if I speak for all three of us, is that I think we all sell most of our cider in our tasting room, which means that we have a lot more freedom to um, kind of experiment or even throw some fun, crazy ideas at the wall, and honestly just see what people's responses are. I definitely am lucky that I have a good crew here now, that good team of bartenders, good partners that I throw crazy ideas out there, and most of the time they say that's cool. So and we're selling all of our cider, most of it in our tasting room, which really kind of gives us an advantage in that aspect. In terms of things that I'm excited about lately, obviously co-ferments has been something I've been into. Co-fermenting wine and cider, I think I love wine. Wine's like one of those things that is almost uncomparable for a meal. And when you can combine that with cider, lowering the ABV down, making it very drinkable, that's kind of what got me interested in the co-ferments in the first place. now we've been taking those same co-ferments, like our Roses Red, which is our kind of our classic rosé cider, and we've been aging them in really interesting barrels now. So we have a new cider that's going to be coming out soon that's half aged in PX sherry casks and half of it's aged in bourbon barrels. So kind of bring in both those elements to it, and then we have that same batch also aged in Ardbeg Scotch whiskey casks and PX Sherry. So we're kind of going to play around with what do the barrels do to this flavor profile? How does it influence that? So yeah, kind of barrels has kind of been the focus of late for me. We make a smoked cider, which has been fun. I'm a big mezcal, Rausch beer, Scotch whiskey drinker, and trying to get that into the cider world is something fun that I've been playing around with. So yeah, we're kind of always experimenting, but also always trying to get deeper on the same thing we've also been always doing, and that's kind of the world I live in these days. Um,
Uh, so whether it's an event like Cider Feast or at a a bar where your ciders may be, what are some of the you know the more typical ciders that you have out there in the market?
so yeah, our Atlantica cider at this point is the one cider that kind of gets a little bit further away from our tasting room. That's our it's kind of Asturian inspired cider. Slightly different from kind of a Basque inspired cider where it's kind of dialed back on the acidity. Kind of is more saline and drinks more kind of I don't know, it has a little bit more of this umami approach to kind of that drinking experience, a very like light, effervescent yet kind of savory experience. So Atlantic is one that we age in our big oak foeder, which is about 600-gallon oak tank,
Wow.
and so we'll make that each year, and that kind of is the one cider we kind of been spreading out further away from us. And kind of, I think that it's a great cider. It's like 6.8% and drinks really well in both a pub, but also at a restaurant. So that's kind of been one that I've been drinking, and I drink it all the time. It's one that really can be at every table for every occasion, which I
That's
get
great.
excited about.
And Zach, where is your tasting room?
So yeah, tasting rooms in Winthrop, Maine, which is about an hour drive north of Portland, from Apres and Allagash. Um, and we're on a 60-acre farm here. We're in the process of figuring out if we ever want to plant apples here. I have a little nursery going of some trees, and we're kind of figuring out what we would want to plant here someday. But as of right now, just production here, a big tasting room in an 1800s built barn. About 1830 it was built. It's actually on the old Woolworth estate. And yeah, so we're kind of on this beautiful piece of land. It's kind of an excuse to get out of the city, just walk around with chickens crawling underneath you. Yeah, just enjoy nature. It's kind of a great summer excuse to just get out of the city, drink a cider. We've got cocktails, we've got wines, we've got beers. You can kind of, choose your own adventure when you come here. So
So if I
I'm lucky to be here.
jump on the Amtrak down Easter from Boston or even my hometown, Haverhill, Mass, where do I get off? What's the closest stop to Winthrop?
Probably Brunswick. Probably have to pick you up around there, which isn't too far away. 30-ish minutes. I'll come pick you up, come up here. We'll get some food at the food truck and start drinking.
It's still on my list. And then Patrick, I know you're at Allagash. Where in Portland is Allagash with the tasting room? And do you guys serve oysters too?
No, we do I saw your email. No, sorry, we don't. You can get some
I swear to God, someone said, "Oh,
downtown.
we love
Lobster rolls
oysters in
though.
the
Yeah, we
oyster
got
lobster."
lobster rolls. Yeah. Yeah, we're in Portland, sort of around the outskirts to some extent, so away from the water, right on Industrial Way. And this is actually our 30th anniversary this year, right now,
Wow,
which is
congrats.
crazy. So yeah, I've been there about half that time. And what was your question?
Just where is it in Portland? That's I can never figure it out. I've only been there a few times, so I don't know the lay of the land.
Yeah, it's sort of on the outskirts. So if you're driving into Portland proper, you're going to be closer to downtown. Downtown is closer to the water. we're a bit away from there. So if you are in downtown Portland, we're about, I don't know, a 15-minute drive away. So not too far at all.
Are you north, south, or west?
I
Yeah.
want to say west, I guess.
I mean, it's kind of where all the original kind of breweries started out, right? I mean, it feels like, that was the original incubator for breweries, and there's still a bunch there. So if you're coming for a drinking experience, you can hit Allagash and hit a bunch of other places at the same time.
Yep, Geary's was one of the first, if not maybe the first. They're right down the road still from us, and yeah, there's a lot going on Industrial Way. Like Zach was saying, it's not just us. You can go to Geary's. There's a distillery called New England Distilling right on that road too. It's walkable from the brewery. Actually, one of the owners from that place was the second employee at Allagash. So it's a nice little tie-in, and we get barrels from them. Actually, that barrel-aged cider I mentioned earlier that we're going to be releasing at some point this year, a portion of the blend was cider aged in their rum barrels. So we try to collaborate with them as much as possible. And actually, a couple weeks ago, they distilled some cider for us to do a little Pomo-like project a few years from now.
Well, that's a whole other show. We'll talk about
yeah.
we'll go way back. And then Larry, for you, Apres, tell us where it is. I kind of know where it is, but I don't know if our listeners do, if they don't know
Yeah, so
Portland.
we're right in the middle of East Bayside. We've been here about going on 4 years in this old, like, looks like an airplane hangar. It wasn't. We're right in the middle between Rising Tide and Austin Street and Bellflower and Good Fire and Lone Pine. Who else I'm forgetting? But so we're also, we're right in the middle of this great like beer area, and that's actually really helped us when we started out. A lot of people would go on brewery crawls and look for something different. So our location has been extremely advantageous to us.
It's great, man. You guys, this is a really great show. Why don't you each get one question you want to ask someone else, or a closing statement? I feel like Larry has a question for one of you guys.
Well, I definitely don't. But I was going to say to Patrick, a couple of years ago, I had a whiskey that New England Distilling had done with one of your saisons at the time, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah, that was actually my beer. It was called Allagash Saison, and there may be something similar coming down the road. That one specifically was called Rack 4. So that's what New England Distilling branded that one as. And we have since given them more beer, actually, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. So I guess that's all I'll say about that one.
Now, I remember the Allagash saison. Um, we, there was there's a brewery in Brooklyn called Threes. I'm sure y'all
Yeah.
know them. And I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, they had every year they hosted a saison day, where there was a homebrew competition of homebrewers who had made saison. And once your founder Rob Todd was there, and we did a radio show. I think that we were drinking. Would you have had Allagash saison back then?
I think so. And Saison Day is a made up holiday by us, actually. And it is happening again this year on April 19th, and Threes will be participating in that event again.
You
So
get the day off. Is it a federal holiday or
I don't
just
know.
local?
You gotta look into that. I'm not
Hey,
sure where you look it
these
up.
days there might be new holidays, and you might as well start suggesting them.
Pub
Yeah.
cider day.
Pub cider day, I like that. And then Zach, for you, let's bet. I want to give you credit again. Thanks for inviting me up to Portland. I'm glad we finally made it up last year, and looking forward to being there May 11th, Mother's Day. Tell our listeners what was the Cider Feast vibe like? Because you guys all helped make it special. I know we had a room full of Maine cider makers.
Yeah, I mean, Thanks for coming up and making it happen. We don't really have a cider fest up here, and it was kind of fun to do one last year and kind of get that kick started to kind of just start getting the momentum going with cider here. I keep wanting to keep pushing that forward, and if we can grow Maine cider, it'll help all of us to kind of just keep being able to innovate and grow what we're doing. Oxbow has been great supporters of what we do, and I was happy that that was kind of the location of the fest. So it's kind of in this Oxbow's got this great little nook on Washington Avenue with duck fat there. You've got Anoche, the cider bar, right there, which is kind of like another great part of the whole cider feast day. Is as you leave the festival, you can walk right into an amazing cider bar and get also an awesome gin and tonic. But yeah, I mean, Oxbow's been great supporters of us, and I'm happy that they're the host. It's a great big space, so we can all hang out. I feel like last year was the best weather day of so far of the year, for a little portion of the day at least. And and yeah, it was fun to see a lot of cider makers that I haven't seen pour at a festival before. So that was an exciting thing to see. And yeah, and having the support from Oxbow was great. And yeah, I mean they help us with a lot of stuff. They clean our kegs for us. They help us with everything. So we have a lot of help from them, and um, yeah, I'm excited to see where we keep taking this thing. So
Yeah, no, dude. Hopefully, I can stay along for the ride with you guys because it's fun as hell for me to come up and get to taste with all of you, and I'm wide open to being part of that with you guys in whatever way it evolves to. So thank you.
Can I just add in real quick too? Aside from Cider Feast being, as Zach pointed out, kind of one of the first cider festivals in Portland, I think what made it so special was that it was mostly the cider makers themselves. And I think that just adds like another level of authenticity, another level of engagement. I think some of the people who were there don't have tasting rooms, so this was a chance for them to kind of interact with customers and get that feedback face to face. There were a lot of kind of first year cideries, and I just think there's a lot of energy there. It was really really fun.
Larry, that's what's exciting about it. It is an early stage thing, and there's so many cider makers there. A lot of times, as things evolve, they get a little bigger. I don't think they take it for granted, but people start having reps, take over that role for them. And I'm just thrilled that out of state, Eden Cider's Eleanor Leisure is coming this year herself. So that keeps that tradition going of founders and cider makers coming there in person. And I feel like what's going on in Portland is pretty special. So again, thank you guys for being part of it. Thank you guys for, you know, helping it keep going. We're gonna do it again this year. And it's really special for me. So, but I love the drinks. I love the beverage, and I could. It wasn't just like there was one cidery that stood out. It was that almost every single cidery there was just outstanding and a little difference. Fogtown, Cornish, Apres, the Allagash cider. Absolem. I'm just saying that because you guys are with me. But on rocky ground, and I got to finally meet David Buchanan from Portersfield Cider, a guy that we connected with over his book, Taste Memory, which was it's an amazing book of his journey. I mean, that guy's there, he's tending, isn't he more of he's just an experimental plant grower, he's just amazing.
he's
Um,
a grower first for sure, 100%,
Yeah,
or
he's going
shows
on
first.
10 years. Yeah, Portersfield, I think, is going on 10 years open, which is a great milestone.
and that's another reason we had to go to Maine because there were a couple of times almost came to Massachusetts, and there was always something. It was like there was a drought. He was always worried about his plants. And I think this was the only time he was able to go to Portland because it's not too far from where he is. So thanks, Zach. Thanks for inviting me up because it was a big day for me, and I don't know how to articulate it other than that you guys have articulated it. So I guess we'll call this a show. So thanks so much, Larry, Patrick, and Zach, for joining me here on Heritage Radio Network. Big shout out to our engineer George, who's going to clean this up and make it sound really good. And I'm Jimmy Carbone. We'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. All right. Hopefully see you guys in Portland for Cider Feast May 11th. All right. Thanks.